What could one person killing another over a dispute cause? Well, a lot of trouble and possibly the start of a war. You see, Kansas in the 1850s, they were having conflicts between pro-slavery settlers that were mostly Democrats and anti-slavery Republicans that were known as Free Staters. Tensions were running hot. Franklin Coleman, a pro-slavery man, and Charles Dow, an anti-slavery person, a Free Stater, were having issues over not slavery, but a land dispute. A simple land dispute over a 250-yard strip near their properties. It was supposedly owned by a man named Jacob Branson, who lived with Dow. Well, November 21st, 1855, Coleman saw Dow at a blacksmith shop in Lawrence. Something happened between these men, and Coleman shot Dow with a shotgun. He claimed later that it was self-defense. Hours later, Branson discovered him at the blacksmith and then went and buried him. He wanted revenge, so he and some other anti-slavers went and burned Coleman's house to the ground. Coleman was not there at the time. They went on to burn other pro-slavery cabins. Sheriff Sam Jones, a pro-slaver, was alerted to the disturbance. Coleman surrendered and he was claiming self-defense, but he wanted something done about Branson. So Sheriff Jones let him go. Then, on November 26, he went out and arrested Branson for disturbing the peace. Branson's neighbors, led by Sam Wood, intercepted Jones and forcefully rescued Branson. Jones demanded a militia from the territory governor, Wilson Shannon. But Jones did not wait. He went on his own and gathered about 1,500 men.
Cutthroats, murderers, bounty hunters, desperados, mugs, pugs, thugs, nitwits, halfwits, dimwits, vipers, con men, Indian agents, Mexican bandits.
Most of these men came from Missouri. They were nothing but a band of border ruffians.
Muggers, buggerers, bushwhackers, hornswagglers, horse thieves, bull dykes, train robbers, bank robbers.
They raided the Liberty Arsenal in Missouri. They took guns, a cannon, cutlasses. They then headed to Lawrence. Free State men such as John Brown and his sons gathered their own militia of about 800 men to counter the ruffians that were led by Sheriff Jones. This was known as the Wakarusa War. It was named so because it took place in the Wakarusa River Valley. Now this pro-slavery band headed by Sheriff Jones headed towards Lawrence, and the Free Staters were now ready and waiting for them. It was starting to get out of hand. On December 8th, Governor Shannon, not knowing what to do, came down and forced a peace treaty between the two parties. The one thing that they wanted, do not harbor Branson. There was one death in the conflict, Thomas Barber, who was on his way to help with the anti-slavers but was shot by a pro-slaver. Jones went back to Lawrence in April to arrest some Free Staters that were involved in the Wakarusa War. He repeatedly attempted to capture Branson, Wood, and other Lawrencers that were involved in his rescue. First, he went to Lawrence to arrest a man for breaking and entering. The sheriff was surrounded by an angry mob. The man's enraged wife drew her revolver and fired point blank in his head, grazing his temple and cutting off a lock of hair. She fired 4 more times at Jones, but Jones ran out of town with his prisoner. He again returned to Lawrence, this time to arrest Sam Wood. A jeering crowd stole his revolver, knocked him to the ground, and Woods escaped. A few days later, an armed posse of 4 men and Jones returned to arrest Branson's rescuer. Once again, an angry mob intervened, swarmed around him, struck him in the face, and knocked him to the ground. Well, finally, Governor Shannon had had enough of this. He requested a military intervention to assist Jones in serving his warrants in Lawrence. He had an escort of about 11 federal soldiers. It's said that he might have been drunk half the time and was waving his revolver in people's faces. Jones entered the town, made 6 arrests, but that night while he was still in town, he was in a military tent and somebody, a mysterious person, shot him in the back. It didn't kill him, but it stirred up a lot of trouble. Jones got Marshal Israel Donaldson to make a proclamation backed by the 1st District Court. He had some warrants that were going to be served against the extra-legal Free State legislatures. They said that the Free State Hotel, which was made of stone, was some kind of a military fortress with portholes for cannons. They intended on destroying the hotel and 2 anti-slavery newspapers, the Herald of Freedom and the Kansas Free State. They took over the home of Charles Robinson, the future governor of Kansas. They also pointed a cannon towards the town of Lawrence. They sealed off the town so no one could escape. They were flying flags of Alabama and South Carolina and saying something like Southern rights and white supremacy. Shaler Eldridge was the proprietor of the hotel and went down to meet Donaldson. He brought Donaldson back to the hotel and they ate the finest of everything. While there, Donaldson interviewed Eldridge. Bogus Sheriff Sam Jones then spoke to the town representative Sam Pomeroy and also Charles Robinson. He told them that everybody in town must give over their weapons, disarm, or they were going to attack. Pomeroy told him, "We can't make people do that." He tried to appease Jones and gave him the town's cannon. That didn't work at all. So this Sheriff Jones went and told everybody, "Get out of the hotel or you're gonna die." They pointed their own cannon, called the Old Sacramento, at the hotel. The first shot went right over the roof and everybody started cheering wildly. That just made Jones mad. The second shot did very little damage. He was beginning to get very frustrated, so he got a keg of gunpowder. When it blew, all it did is make smoke and a bunch of noise, but very little damage to the property. Extremely angry and frustrated, he went and started setting the place on fire. He destroyed both newspapers and then took the presses and threw them in the Kansas River. When he was done with that, he began looting the town. And just to be a nice guy, Sheriff Jones, this bogus sheriff, decided to go burn down Dr. Charles Robinson's home, the very home he had been using this whole time. This all sounds so legal and sheriff-like, right? Come to town, take over the doctor's house, point a cannon towards it, seal off the town, threaten to take everybody's weapons against them, blow up the hotel, destroy their newspaper. What? All this was called the Sack of Lawrence. Well, the sheriff and all his ruffians and the marshal left. What was the aftermath? Well, the Herald of Freedom restarted itself later. Shalar Eldridge bought the charred remain and built the Eldridge House. They wanted a cannon, so they went out and followed Jones to a cabin. They chased Jones away and set the cabin on fire. Inside the charred remains of the cabin was the Old Sacramento dressed up as a woman. They didn't have any ammo, so they recovered all the press types and melted them down to cannonballs. One man killing another over a land dispute, a bogus sheriff, pro-slavers versus anti-slavers, ruffians and thugs destroying a town. All this happening in Kansas led to wild times. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time here on Strange History.